So with this ongoing pandemic, there are certain things that we just don't have the liberty of doing, right? Like, I can't remember the last time I went to a gay bar. And I thought, as a result, it would be nice to share some nostalgic stories about the iconic gay bar that I used to visit in New York City that no longer exists, no longer a running establishment, but I want to talk about the legend of Eastern Bloc. So Eastern Bloc was a gay bar in the East Village in Manhattan in New York City that I used to frequent. Iconic New York City dive bar, gay dive bar, and they actually closed in 2017. But I want to talk about this bar. So Eastern Bloc was, as I said, this dive bar, this gay dive bar in the East Village. And the East Village, for those of you who aren't familiar with New York City, the East Village is a neighborhood full of bars and restaurants in New York City. It's pretty young, probably because it's close to NYU, so there's a lot of college-age kids. But there's also just on the weekends and holidays, there's a lot of people from surrounding boroughs and like New Jersey and stuff who come in to that neighborhood specifically because there's so many bars and eateries and stuff like that. Eastern Bloc had a communist aesthetic inside, which was very interesting considering most gay bars, now that I think about it, most gay bars in New York City don't really have a theme. I mean, the other gay bars of that neighborhood in the East Village, so like Boiler Room and Phoenix, even the gay bars of, I guess in the West Village, some of them are very campy and have their own themes, but when I think about like the average gay bar in New York City, so for example, the Hell's Kitchen bars, they all kind of have the same aesthetic in terms of just the way they're built, the kind of drinks that they serve. But Eastern Bloc, you came in, it was dimly lit, red lights, red walls, and all this kind of like communist government, Big Brother propaganda all around. Eastern Bloc was the first gay bar I ever entered, that I ever went to when I was, I guess, 20 or 21, finishing up college at NYU. I lived in the area and I had only ever heard of that bar because it was owned, or it was co-owned by the then boyfriend of Anderson Cooper. And so it was just something that like the NYU kids talked about, like, oh, there's this bar that it's Anderson Cooper's boyfriend's bar. So it was the only one I had ever heard of. And I mean, there was Google Maps and stuff at the time, of course, but I just, I heard the name and I thought, okay, I'm gonna try this bar. And every time I went in the beginning, it was just interesting. Like I would meet all these interesting characters, and there's something that to this day, I feel is only really captured by dive bars because they're so compact and small. And when there isn't a dance floor, when it's just people standing there drinking, there's something about that kind of environment that facilitates actually talking to other people. Even just because of the nature of like bumping into people and then you make eye contact and you start talking, there's something about that that I'll always be really nostalgic about because I haven't really experienced that since leaving New York City. New York City, everything's so cramped and crowded that it's very much a cultural thing that you just start talking to strangers purely because of close proximity. When I lived in LA, everything's kind of stretched out, which has its own benefits, of course, but it's just harder to organically start conversations. And obviously being here in Miami now with this pandemic, I mean, socializing in public places is not really accessible. So I started going to this bar in my early 20s, and because the first few times I met such interesting people, I mean, I've made actually videos about guys that I've met at this bar. I actually feel the most interesting suitors I met at that bar, that kind of stays with you. And even if you don't experience that the next 10 times, there's a part of you that always wants to feel that again. So I found myself throughout my 20s always going back to this bar. Those of you who've been following me for a while on this channel, you know that I'm the first to admit I wasn't really that happy in New York City, and I left for a reason, and I'm glad I left New York City. But I do still definitely have this like wistful sentiment when I think about certain moments in time that I just haven't recaptured since, and I just don't think you can recapture that kind of essence and magic once you leave New York City. For example, I have this memory of strolling into Eastern Bloc multiple times, late at night, drunk, 2 a.m, and going all the way straight to the back where there was a DJ, and oftentimes the DJ of the night would just be one of the co-owners of the bar. And I would greet him, say hi, flirt a little bit, whatever, and then he would give me these free drink cards, and it was a card, like a Joker card from a deck of cards, and on the back it said a free drink. And so I would, flirt my way to get free drinks. It's a silly recollection, but just the idea that like I had this like process and I knew how to get free drinks at the bar because I made friends with one of the co-owners. Something about that for me that feels very like New York City, small, tucked away dive bar community. Eastern Bloc was that bar that everybody kind of just shows up at like 1 or 2 in the morning. They start out somewhere else. They start out somewhere where the drinks are maybe cheaper or closer to home. But if you were in the East Village and gay late at night on a weekend, you always end up there. Over the years, I noticed a shift in the bar culture there. The older I got, the more I noticed that it wasn't getting as packed. And there was this cultural shift where Hell's Kitchen really did become like the gay neighborhood of New York City. It was already becoming that, but it became a full-on transition where more and more bars were appearing out of nowhere in Hell's Kitchen, and more young gay men were kind of flocking there both to live and to just hang out. The East Village has sort of like a grungy, raw edge to it, and there's an aesthetic to that, of course, and there's a vibe, but gay men can be very bougie, I guess is the best word to use. And truth be told, bars like Eastern Bloc, after a while, the drinks are really pricey, and it's like you come in and there's like an odor, and there's like, it's just very grungy, it doesn't feel super clean, and I think the edge of it just wasn't really connecting with its community anymore. And so I would keep returning to try to relive those memories from my early 20s finishing up college, but I wasn't really capturing that anymore. Before I knew it, I showed up one night and it was shut down. In 2017, they just shut down. It didn't exist anymore. Eventually, it got converted into a whole different kind of vibe, a whole different bar, and it became this sort of like eccentric, campy bar owned by Alan Cumming, of all people. If any of you have Eastern Bloc stories, I would love to hear them in the comments.